بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم أما بعد. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the especially merciful, we ask Him to send His peace and blessings upon our dear and beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his family, his companions, and all those who follow them in righteousness until the last day. As to what follows. So, inshallah, last week we covered or started covering. What did we cover last week? Those of you who were here last week, what did we talk about last week? Somebody remind me. And don't jump at once. Being kind to your guest. Ya salam, barakallahu feek. Tawheed, we talked about Tawheed. Which, by the way, Sheikh Tariq, what does that mean? Belief in the oneness of Allah. That's the meaning of Tawheed. Jayyid, mashallah, that's good. Alhamdulillah, he was paying attention. Mashallah, tabarakallah. Tayyib, so what else? We just mentioned Tawheed and that was it? That's all we talked, and then we just got up and left? What else did we talk about? The attributes of Allah. Yes, we did briefly mention that. We didn't talk about it extensively. We said we're going to talk about that later. But yes, we mentioned the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His attributes. What else did we mention? Yeah. What else? You were here, right? Then you gotta give me something. Give me just one thing. All I need is one thing. Him being the creator, al-khaliq, and the sustainer, al-mudabbir. Jazakallah khair. Allah yabarik fi. Al-mudabbir, and the provider, al-raziq. All those three things combined, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-raziq, that He is al-khaliq, and that He is al-mudabbir. These three things, they revolve around something called Tawhid Al Uloohiyah. Tawhid Al Uloohiyah, the oneness of Allah or God Almighty's lordship. The oneness of His lordship. That God Almighty does certain things that makes Him Lord. That makes Him God. And these certain things that He does, nobody else does. And because of those things that He does, His actions, those certain things, like Him creating everything, like Him providing for everything, Him sustaining and keeping everything going, He is Lord. Jazakallah khair, brother. Tell you one thing. We need one thing that was mentioned last week. One thing. Tawhid Al-Ibadah. Tawhid Al-Ibadah, the oneness of our worship for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is actually what we're going to talk about in depth today, is about the concept and the idea of worship in Islam. Is it just limited to rituals and a few certain sayings, specific sayings, and that's it? Or is it deeper than that, and is it more than that? That's what we're going to discuss today. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Yes, sir. We talked about the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Elijah. That was another thing that we mentioned as well. Matter of fact, it was someone else who brought it up. It was you all, someone in one of the students who brought it up, right? But we talked about that. So just to see if y'all remember us talking about it, are the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala limited to 99? Are you sure? You weren't even here, but you're sure though? No limit? Unlimited? Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we'll see. We're going to talk about that, inshallah, hopefully the next class. Inshallah. So maybe y'all can look that up and read. It's in your book, by the way. So if you read your book, you'll find out. But what we will be discussing today, is about Tawheed Al-Ibadah, the concept of ibadah or worship in Islam, and then the conditions of ibadah, the conditions of worship in Islam, which are extremely, extremely, extremely important. I cannot overemphasize how important that is. which is why we have to discuss it today. By the way, what I'm going to discuss is in your book. Again, please forgive me. I'm not sure exactly the page order because, as you see, I have a digital copy. But it's going to be in that orange section, and it's going to be about the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and everything that follows after that. Anybody know what page that is? 58. So the first thing, because I see some new faces here, we're going to talk... 57, Jazakallah khair. So the first thing is, what is Tawheed? And then we're just going to jump into Ibadah. I'm not going to talk about Tawhid Al Uloohiyah because that's what we talked about last week, but I do want to mention Tawheed so that you understand what we're talking about when we're discussing today's topic. So the word Tawheed in Arabic, it's called a masdar, which means like a noun. It's a type of noun. But it is from the word wahada. It's from the word wahada, which is an action or a verb in Arabic. And it means to make something one. What does it mean, Ibsa? It means to make something one. Right? The word wahada is the action, the verb of making something into one. Wahada yuwahidu tawheed. So when you make something one, right? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many and then we combine him into one? It does not mean that. But it means the way we understand Allah, the way we deal with Allah, the way we perceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He is one, He is unique, He doesn't have any partners, He doesn't have any children, He doesn't have any cousins, He doesn't have a tribe, He's not the CEO of a company and they has, like board members that are with Him. He is one and alone, and especially in regards to the fact that what the Sheikh mentioned earlier, that He's the Creator, Al-Khaliq, that He is Al-Raziq, and that He is Al-Mudabbir. In regards to His actions, He is unique. No one else does these actions. No one else is the Creator. And when I say Creator, I mean creation from nothing. Because an artist might say, well, I created this wonderful masterpiece, right? Right? Michelangelo with the Sistine Chapel, or Leonardo, for example, with some of their statues and whatnot that they make. They'll be like, I created that. You could say that, right? Or a chef, he makes a wonderful meal and he says, look at my creation. Takes that and puts it on Pinterest or something. But if you look at all of those, an engineer who designs a beautiful car, they all have to take things and manipulate them. Right? An artist, he needs a canvas, he needs paint, he needs his stick, all of those things. He needs things, and he just manipulates them. Someone who is, what do you call it? The person, a mason who makes like statues or whatnot. He needs what? He needs granite, he needs stone, he needs marble, right? And then he manipulates those things. Someone is a chef, he needs food, and he cuts it up, does this, that, or whatever, but it's things that are already there. They already exist. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates, He says what? Kun fayakun. He says be, and it is. He creates. There's nothing there. He says be, and then there's something there. He doesn't need anything to make something. Does that make sense, the difference? So somebody who says, like, I create with my artistic ability. Al-Muhim. So Allah creates from nothing. And then the fact that He is Ar-Raziq, again, all of creation depend on Him. For our food, for our air, for our sunshine, all of this. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, وَمَا مِن دَابَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. In Surah Hud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and there isn't an animal or a beast on the land except that it depends on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for its sustenance. That's how He's Ar-Raziq, that He's the provider. Allah mentions in the Quran, and there isn't an animal on the earth. So that means He provides for us, He provides for animals, for everything that exists. And then, and that's in Surah Hud, ayah number 6. Surah Hud, ayah number 6. Which, by the way, this is mentioned in your book. I'm just going over this briefly. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Him being Al-Khaliq. Allahu khaliqu kulla shay'in wa huwa ala kulli shay'in wakil. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of everything. Kulli shay'. Allah created everything. And He, of course, is wakil. He's like the protector over everything. And this is in Surah Al-Zumar. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in regards to him being like the maintainer and sovereign owner of everything. لِلَّهِ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا فِيهِنْ وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? And for him is the kingdom of the heavens and the earth. For Allah is the kingdom of the heavens and the earth and everything therein. وَمَا فِيهِنْ, and everything that it contains. وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. And he is over all things powerful and able. And so these are just 3 verses showing that Allah is the provider, the creator, and he's the sustainer. This is all about his actions. So then here's the next logical step is what? If he's the one who made you, and he's the one who made me, and he's the one who made everything here, and he's the one that provided my clothes and my food, and for you and your family, all of that. If he's the one who did all of that and keeps everything going, then how can we worship anything other than him? How can we worship anything other than Allah? If he did all of those things for us, he didn't even ask for it. You didn't ask to have 2 eyes. Some people are born without eyes, right? Some people are born blind. You didn't even ask for it. He gave it to you. Your heart, your lungs, everything that you have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to you. Everything, no matter how little it is. Even if you were destitute and poor and on the street and had nothing, the mere fact that you exist is from God Almighty. That he gave that to you. And so if that is the case, if your mere existence is owed to God Almighty, then it makes all the sense in the world that we only worship him. And just so I don't belabor this issue, I just want to give a simple example that I give every time. If I gave somebody here, or if somebody was given $10 million, well, just to be certain, let's say 20 million. If I gave you $20 million, Sheikh Bilal, if I gave you 20 million, that could pretty much last him for the rest of his life, right? I mean, as long as he didn't splurge and do nothing crazy with it. It depends on what you do, but for the most part, you should be pretty much set, right? As long as he doesn't waste it. 20 million, that's a lot of money. Let's assume you're not making any bad investments. Let's say you're just paying your rent, living your regular life. You're not living super extravagantly. You know what I'm saying? You're not investing in, you know what I'm saying, underwater basket weaving or something like that. Don't worry. Nothing like that, right? So now, I give you 20 million. And I say, look, Bilal, all I want you to do, every now and then, just once in a while, just give me a call and tell me thank you. That's all I want. I don't want nothing else. Just give me a call once in a while and be like, hey, man, I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot, man. That was real cool. You gave me $20 million. Thanks. That's it. So, what would you all say? I'm asking you now. What would you all say if Bilal got up, our brother Bilal, he got up and went over to Wahyu, right? Everybody witnessed it. You all saw me. I gave him, I had the briefcase and everything. It was just like, boom, right here. And then he just got up and was like, hey, Wahyu, man, that was really nice of you, man. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for the $20 million. And I'm sitting right here. What would y'all say about Bilal? What's that? It's crazy. That don't make, yeah? He's the only guy that made sense to. Nobody that don't make sense to nobody else. What would you say, Yusuf? You don't know? That wouldn't make no sense. That wouldn't make no sense. Exactly. That would be crazy. That if someone did some good, this huge gesture, for him to get up and then go to somebody else entirely who has nothing to do with it. While he was just over there, he was just chilling, you know, looking at his phone. And he went and told him, thanks, man. Man, I really appreciate it. Wow, gee, thanks, Wahyu. Y'all would be like, that doesn't make sense. And that's exactly what happens when people commit shirk. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them everything, and then they go thank Jesus. Or they go thank Krishna. Or they go thank Buddha. Or they go thank any other idol, or whatever it might be. They thank something else that didn't do that for them, right? And it was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who did that tremendous thing for them, that he created them, that he gave them life, that he provides for them, that he sustains them, that he keeps them going. It only makes sense, like the brother said, it only makes sense that you only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Which is the second category, Tawheed, which we mentioned last week, and which is called Tawheed what? No, that's the first one that we just finished now. That's the first. You just repeated that again. It's the first one. Tawhid Al Uloohiyah is the oneness of God's lordship. The oneness of Allah's lordship. Khalas, that's Tawhid Al Uloohiyah. We're done. That's Al Khaliq, Al Raziq, and so on. We're done with that. So, because He's the creator, because He's the sustainer, it only makes sense to worship Him. So that's Tawheed what? Tawheed Al Ibadah. And he wasn't even here last week. Jazakallah khair, brother. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Al-ibadah. And this is what we want to talk about today. What is ibadah? ما معنى العبادة? ما هو حقيقته? What is the reality of ibadah? So this is very important. If you have a pen, you need to write this down, what I'm going to tell you. Because ibadah, or worship in Islam, before I tell you, let me ask you, what is worship to you? Starting over here. What is worship to you? What do you know worship is? Or how do you understand it?
You do have an intention with specific actions towards your Creator.
Say that again.
An intention with actions that are geared towards your Creator.
Intentions
With actions
with specific actions
towards your Creator.
towards your Creator. Okay, good. MashaAllah, that's good. Wahyu, what's ibadah to you? What do you understand about ibadah? And that's okay if it's in your own words. That's fine. Belief. Said it's belief in the heart, he said.
Yeah, person believe in the heart,
And on our tongues.
and then
And the limbs, our actions. Okay. Okay, mashallah. That's good. That's good. Jazakallah khair. Huh? Anybody else? Anybody else? Yes, Ustad. He said committing ourselves to worshiping one God. Committing ourselves to that. Having perseverance on that. Jazakallah khair. Anybody else? I'm sorry, what was that? Remember? So dhikr. So like mentioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His name and so on. That would be the whole idea of, or the definition of worship. That's how you would understand it? Okay, alhamdulillah, good. Yes.
Every action that the Prophet everything that he established,
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
if you do it in accordance with the way he established it, then every action that you do is part of worship.
Okay, so every action that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did,
Everything that he put together as far as righteous deeds.
mm-hmm.
So if it's in accordance with the way he established it for us to do it, then we, like the brother said, the intention, every action
Mm-hmm.
is a part of the worship. If your intention is right and it's the way that the Prophet Muhammad
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's good. So if your intentions are right, as long as it's in accordance with the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his legacy, then inshallah, you said that's an act of worship. Jazakallah khair. It's very good. It's very good. Sisters, does anybody want to add any sister want to add something? Jazakallah khair. Tayyib. So now I want you to write this down. And that's fine. You can write in your book. That's perfectly fine. Matter of fact, it's a sign of a good student. When his book, right, in the margins and in the lines where there's little open spaces, that's a sign of a good student where he takes notes in those places. So don't be like, oh, this is a nice book. I don't want to mark it up or whatever. And they have the علامة الطالب العلم that he's writing in his book. That's a good indication. But write this down. This is a textbook definition given by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. You can find it in his book. It's called Al Ubudiyah. It's a book, it's called Servitude. About servitude. And in that, he elaborates on a number of different concepts in Islam, namely our servitude and our worship and our obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he gives a wonderful definition that, inshallah, is in a very encompassing definition. It's the word ibadah, ismun jami' لكل ما يحبه الله ويرضاه من الأقوال والأعمال الظاهرة والباطنة. He said, ismun jami'. Ismun jami' means an encompassing noun. Like this noun, this word, the word ibadah, encompasses all of what he's about to say afterwards. It encompasses all of this. Ismun jami' لكل ما يحبه الله. That everything that Allah loves. The word ibadah covers everything that Allah loves. وَيَرْضَاه. And that he is pleased with. Everything that Allah loves and he's pleased with is ibadah. مِنَ الْأَقْوَالِ. Just like the brother Benjamin said. He said, when you say La ilaha illallah, when you say Allahu Akbar, when you say Alhamdulillah, when you make dhikr of Allah, min al-aqwali, from your statements, this is ibadah. Wal a'mali, and from your actions. Al-zahira, those that are apparent. Wal batina, and those that are hidden. So I'll say it one more time. Bismillah. That it's an encompassing noun that encompasses everything that Allah loves, everything that he is pleased with, from your actions, from your statements, those that are apparent, and those that are hidden. So what does that mean? That means now, pretty much if I put everything together that all of you said, you would combine it into this statement. You mentioned about the intentions, about wanting, and he mentioned about directed towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that's everything Allah loves and that he's pleased with, because it's not for anybody else. But what this means, when we say everything that Allah loves and everything that he's pleased with, that means what? Any action that you do, seemingly significant, like the rituals, because that's typically what we think of when we think of worship. We typically think of prayer, fasting, hajj, talab al-ilm, reading the Quran, dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, making istighfar, making tawbah. Those are the things that jump to our mind. Rituals. We think of rituals when we think of worship. But if it's everything that Allah loves and everything that he's pleased with, from your statements and your actions, let me ask you a question. Is Allah pleased with us if we were good to our neighbors? That pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does he love that? When you're good and respectful to your neighbors? Then this is an act of worship. If it's directed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like the brother said. And if it's according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like the brother said. If you're good to your parents and you serve them and you call them every now and then and you send them gifts and you visit them and you shovel their snow and you take out their garbage, is Allah pleased with that? Sisters, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pleased with that? Then this is an act of worship. As long as you have the right intention, like the brother said, and as long as it's according to the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you show up to work on time, and if you work as hard as you can, whether your manager's watching or not watching, but because you're thinking about Allah, is that something that Allah loves? Do you think that's something Allah loves? And if you have the right intention, then that's an act of worship. You know what that means? That's almost like a principle, right? It's almost like us being able to turn lead into gold. That's something that's typically like worthless. You didn't think anything of it, me drinking this water. If I drink this water with the intention that I could get my throat right, so I can convey this message for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every sip that I drink is an act of worship. But if I don't have that intention, I'm just thirsty, and I'm just trying to quench my thirst, then that's all it is. It's just me sipping some water. But if I have the intention, for example, if you go to sleep, is that an act of worship? No, I'm just tired. I'm worn out. I had a long day of work and I just crash on the bed. Is that an act of worship? It's not. It's not an act of worship. It's just a regular, mundane, simple thing. But you know how like in the summertime when Fajr's at like 3:30 in the morning? Y'all remember that, right? That wasn't that long ago. Right? And as soon as the Isha is done, you go right to bed because you want to make sure that you wake up for Fajr. You want to make sure that you get up for Fajr. Did that change your sleep now? That changed your sleep. Because you went to sleep specifically with in mind that you were thinking, I want to go to sleep so I can wake up for Fajr. It has now changed. Every Z that you catch, every little sheep that you was looking at in your dream, all of that you was getting rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For every snore, every toss and turn, you was getting reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But, like the Shaykh, he said, you had to have the right intention. And we'll talk about that too, the conditions of it, making something ibadah. But the point here is what? Is that anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, anything that He's pleased with actions, those that we typically think of, like our praying Isha, Allah is pleased with that. That's why He legislated it. That's why He makes us do that. Because that's something that He loves. That you have to make Hajj at least once in your lifetime, that's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. When you make adhkar, or that you go, recite the Quran, those are things that Allah loves. Some of them are actions, we said a'mali, and then some of them are aqwal, your statements. So when you say la ilaha illallah, when you say Allahu Akbar, right? Those are statements. When you smile in your brother's face, when you pray like we did, those are actions. Tayyib. Now what is this al-zahira wal-batina? Those things that are hidden, apparent, zahira wal-batina, and those that are apparent. What do you guys think he meant when the Shaykh said that? What do you think he meant? Actions that are apparent and hidden, and statements that are apparent and hidden. What do you all think he means by that?
When you're worshiping Allah and you're in ibadah, there's no one but you, no other people around.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. He said if you're worshiping Allah and nobody else is around. Naam, Shaykh.
Yeah, the hidden parts and the openness around people, when the hidden crowd around, when you don't have to alone.
That's the hidden part, huh? Okay, mashallah. But let me ask you, we're talking about ibadah in regards to and how Allah sees it. It's not about whether we can see it or not. Are you doing it in a secret? Is what I mean, excuse me. About you doing it in secret, it's not that. It's about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can, it's about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see and what we can't see. He's talking about the ibadah of the heart. So for example, you say, what do you mean? What do you mean the actions of the heart? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, وَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِي إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Don't be afraid of them. Be afraid of me if you are really believers. When you are afraid, Sheikh, when you are afraid, where is that? Your fear is in here, in your pinky? In my shin right here? Where is your fear? You're afraid is where? It's in the heart. When you love Allah, or when you love something, when we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That's also where? That's in your heart. Those are actions of the heart. Those are things that are hidden that people don't see. And that's what he means by actions that are apparent, like our physical actions, and the ones that are hidden are like the ones that people can't see. When you put your trust in Allah, when you put your hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of those things are hidden actions. They are actions of the heart. Your heart actually has actions that it has to do. Things that it has to do in order for it to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that make sense? Alhamdulillah. Tayyib. And so actually, if you look in your book, it has a part where it says belief in Allah's lordship is set in your heart, it sets your heart at rest. Because when your heart commits itself, or you commit your heart to these different acts of worship, like fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like loving Him, like having hope in Him, more than you hope in anything else, more than you trust in anything else. So you trust in Allah more than you trust in money. You trust in Allah more than you trust in your own abilities. And when you do that, that puts your heart at rest. And it puts your heart at ease. Now, but anyways, so to summarize, ibadah means what? It means everything that Allah, it's an encompassing word, encompasses everything that Allah loves, everything that He's pleased with, from actions and from sayings, those that are hidden and those that are apparent. It's from a book called Servitude, Al Uboohiyah. And you can probably find it too in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, which is like a collection of his religious verdicts and rulings. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. Now, so anyways, why is this important? That we single out Allah, or that we understand worship like this, is because what it means is that your entire life becomes an act of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a process. That's what you're trying to get it to, right? Because this is something that you have to work at. It's almost like a mindset that you have to always constantly be readying your mind for and keeping getting it into that mindset that this is an act of worship for Allah. You don't have to say it on your mouth, but it's something in your mind and in your heart. So for example, when you're taking a shower, instead of just making it a shower, make it that it's wudu and ghusl every time that you do it. For the example, being intimate with your spouse. The Prophet ﷺ, which is mentioned in Sahih Muslim, and some of the Sahaba, when he was explaining about ibadah, they said, Ya Rasulullah, that it's going to be an act of worship. Even when we lay with our wife, even when we're with our spouse, he said, if you had done something haram, and if you had been with someone who was not your wife, he said, wouldn't you be punished for that? He said, yes. Or they said, yes. He said, then likewise you would be rewarded because of the intimate relation with your spouse, meaning that it's also considered an act of worship because you're trying to protect yourself from something haram. Does that make sense? Even when you feed your family. Even when you feed your family. When you go out and work and you buy groceries and you bring that home, you feed your children and your spouse. This is ibadah. And so to summarize this idea, it's from a statement of Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, قُلْ إِنَّ الصَّلَاةِ وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commands Ibrahim alayhi salam to say, قُلْ, say, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةِ, that verily my living, my prayers, وَنُسُكِي, and my sacrifices, وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ, and my living, وَمَمَاتَ, and my dying, لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, is for Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ, and He has no partners in this. وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ, and this is what I've been commanded with. وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, and I am from the first of those who submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you take that verse, that should be like our motto. That should be the motto of the Muslim. That's what we're trying to get to. That are sleeping, that are waking, that are working, that are going to school, that are dealing with our neighbors, that are rearing our children, even in those things that we typically think of as negative. When something bad happens to us, the way that we handle it, all of that, we want to, as much as we can, to turn that into acts of worship. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, strange and wondrous is the affair of the believer. That when his affairs are good, he says, Alhamdulillah. And when you say Alhamdulillah, that's a what? It's an act of worship. And if he's tried and tested, it's the same thing. Submit your whole self to me. I'm not sure of that. I know there's udkhulu fi silmi kafa, which means enter into silmi kafa, into the way of Islam completely. Maybe that one, but I'm not sure about the exact verse. But the idea, though, is completely surrender and submit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's exactly what the verse is saying. And that's what basically it is that we're trying to get our life to be an act of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every waking moment, when you're on the elevator, you don't just sit there and just be, just wasting time looking at your phone. You could be remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you're in a waiting room somewhere, when you're driving in your car, when you're with your children, even when you're with your spouse, and all of these different arenas in your life, you're trying to make it an act of worship. So, the next thing, why this idea is so important about this idea of worship is because that's the only reason why you were created. That's the only reason why I was created. That's the only reason why we're even here. And that's why we are always in a process of trying to make our entire life in accordance with our purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Dhariyat, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I did not create the jinn, I did not create mankind, except that they worship me. That's the only reason why you're here. It's not about getting married. It's not about getting a degree. It's not about work. It's not about war. It's not about peace. It's not about none of all of these things in life. The only reason why we're here, the only reason why we exist is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so what you try to do, what we're all trying to do, this process, is that we're trying to get everything in our life in accordance with that process. When I get married, it's so that I can better worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why I try to choose a righteous spouse. That's why I try to make sure that I'm fulfilling my rights towards her and vice versa, right? So she can remind me about the hereafter. When you have children, you raise them and rear them according to what? In a way that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So thus it becomes an act of worship. And then on top of that, they support you in worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Didn't you see Ibrahim alayhi salam? When he reared his son right, Ismail, what did he do? He helped him build the Kaaba. And they performed the rites of Hajj together. So this is what we're trying to do. And then everything else, even our work, we make sure that we choose a righteous and halal means of sustenance. When you get a job, you don't just go and get any job whatsoever just because it brings in money. Even your work, you even choose categorically, okay, I'm going to choose this job because alhamdulillah, they allow me to pray. Alhamdulillah, they don't tell me about I got to cut off my beard. Alhamdulillah, I can do what I need to do for Jumu'ah, etc., etc. So I choose that work. Of course, you look for a job that gets you money that you can sustain yourself, etc. However, you're going to choose the most important thing is your purpose in life, and that's the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, Tariq, if you apply for a job and they tell you, we're sorry, but we don't pay you to pray, then that means what? Then you mean like, oh, I'm sorry. Then I got to choose another job and I can't work here. Because why? It's interfering with your purpose. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? يا شيخ؟ يعني إذا كان الشغل يتعارض مع العبادة الله عز وجل تختار أيهما؟ العبادة أو الشغل؟ ها؟ لابد أن نختار العبادة. هذا الذي أقول. So that's what we're saying, is that if it interferes with your worship, then you have to choose it. Even, for example, sometimes people don't think about this. Even us being here in America, if for some reason women are not able to wear hijab, they start telling us we can't pray. They start trying to round up Muslims in internment camps. And don't sleep. It's happened before in the United States. La qadar Allah. May Allah protect us. But if something like that was to happen, and they're telling us we can't be Muslim or we can't pray, what does that mean? What does that mean, Musa? That means we got to get up and go. That means we can't stay here. If they are interfering with our way of life and they're stopping us, it doesn't mean we got to fight and everything. No. Look, the earth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wide and vast. That means we got to go somewhere else. Because the most important thing to us is our deen. That's the most important thing to us. Anything that might interfere with that. And that is why, that's part of the reason why we're allowed to stay here. Some people will tell you, you have to leave America because it's the land of the kuffar and you're not allowed to stay here. That's not true. Because we're allowed to have this masjid. Sisters allowed to wear hijab. I'm allowed to have my beard. I can leave work if I need to. I can go to Jummah if I need to. I can pray at the park if I need to. When I'm at Caribou and I just want to step outside and pray in the parking lot. Nobody say nothing to me. Police are not going to be like, hey, excuse me, what are you doing? Right? And because of that, that's part of what allows us to be able to stay here. But if that started being interfered with and they start trying to trample on that and there's no way we can stop it, khalas, then we have to, because our purpose here is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot let anything interfere with that. That's why the concept and the idea, Musa, of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so extremely important. So now we talk about the pillars of worship. What do I need in order to, what do actions need in order to be constituted as an act of worship? It needs two things, and inshallah we'll finish with this. It needs two things. And they've already been mentioned. Tariq mentioned one, and the brother Jazakallah Khair, he mentioned another one. The two things that you need for anything to be constituted as an act of worship, number one is sincerity, and number two is that it has to be in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you are missing one or the other, if you are missing sincerity, there is no, and you have, and it's according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's not an act of worship. If there is sincerity, but it's not according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's not an act of worship. It's not accepted. Not only would it not be considered an act of worship, but it wouldn't even be accepted by Allah. It will be thrown back at that person. And this is important. You know why? Because you'll have some people who will do things, right? And they're sincere. They are so sincere. They did it for nothing but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But because it was built on ignorance, it wasn't according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we have so many people like that today. Y'all heard about that sister who was in Playboy magazine? Wa'iyadhu billah? Yeah, astaghfirullah. There was a sister who did an expose in Playboy magazine. She was wearing hijab. She didn't take her clothes. She wore her clothes. She wore her clothes. Astaghfirullah. I'm sorry. I probably should have said that first. I should have said that first. No, she kept on her clothes. But what? But she was wearing hijab. She said she was representing Islam, that she was proudly representing Islam. Allahu musta'an. It's not my place to question her sincerity. Matter of fact, she probably is deeply sincere to Allah. She probably really thinks she's doing the right thing. She probably has sincerity. But is that really something can we imagine? I don't even want to say that. I shouldn't even say that. But that is something that's far from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. None of his wives would ever even consider even thinking of going anywhere near something like that. There's a sister now who wants to join a beauty pageant. There's a sister now, yeah, she's in the news, she's on NPR, she's all over, brother, in a beauty pageant. And look at this. The biggest thing is not her being in the beauty pageant. You know what the biggest thing is about her being in the beauty pageant? What's giving her attention? It's because she still wants to wear hijab while she's in the beauty pageant. Allah musta'an, brother. But I'm saying her sincerity is probably there. She might even be more sincere than anybody in this room. Allahu a'lam. But because of the ignorance, Allah musta'an, look at what she's doing. And the whole conversation is revolving around Islam and bringing attention to Islam. And she's hoping to open doors for the Muslims and so on and so forth. In a beauty pageant. Even putting Islam aside, the whole idea even of a beauty pageant, that a woman has to go up in front of a bunch of men to self-affirmation, to affirm herself. She needs other people. She sits there so other people can look at her, and based on them telling her she's beautiful, she's comfortable with herself. Forget even not even having Islam, putting Islam aside, the whole concept of a beauty pageant is degrading and demeaning to women in the first place. That her own status and understanding of herself is her being objectified by other people, and she doesn't even feel self-actualized until other people tell her she looks good. But now, Allahumma musta'an, now we have some Muslims who they think they're sincere, and they're saying we want to do this to open doors for other Muslim women and so on. But it's not according to the Sunnah of the Prophet. So you need both of those. And so, how do we know this? How do we know that it has to be according to the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that it has to have sincerity? Firstly, the idea of sincerity or faithfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or singling Him out and doing something only for Him and Him alone, is mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari, Bukhari and Muslim. It's a hadith that's both in Bukhari and in Muslim, wherein the Prophet ﷺ said, it's a very, very famous hadith. As a matter of fact, it's one of the most discussed hadith in Islam. And it's إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى ومن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته للدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, verily or surely, deeds are by their intentions, and everybody shall have whatever it is that they intended. So your actions are based on your motives. Allah is looking at them, He's weighing them and gauging your deeds according to the reason behind why you did it in the first place. And then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, as is his way, in a beautiful way, he gives practical examples. He said, so if someone migrated from the land of kufr, ila Allah wa rasulihi, for Allah and His Messenger, فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. If that was his reason, then that's how he'd be rewarded accordingly. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِلدُّنْيَا. And whoever migrated for some worldly reason, business, money, whatever, أَوْ إِمْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِحُهَا, or to marry some woman, then that's what his hijrah is for, and that's what he's going to get. But when you look at it on the outside, when somebody is getting ready to travel, to make hijrah, let's say we're going to move to, I don't know, Kuwait. We want to move to Kuwait. This is the land of the Muslims. And I'm packing my bags and getting ready to go. And I pack my bags. And somebody else, he packs his bags and he gets ready to go. Is there any difference? And I get my plane ticket and I got my bags and I hop on the plane. And another person, he gets his bags, gets his plane ticket and hops on the plane and goes over there. So far, is there any difference? On the outside, when you see them, there's no difference. The actions are the same. It seems like an act of worship. We're going to Kuwait because it's the land of the Muslims. But the reason behind why I'm doing it. But I'm going over there because for Allah and His Messenger. Because I want to go over there and I want to live amongst the Muslims. I want my children to memorize Quran and I want to be, right? But someone else, because he got a huge business deal and he's about to go over there and make some buku bucks. But when you look at it on the outside, you just see somebody packing their bags, and you look at the other guy, he's just packing his bags and going over. And that's the example the Prophet ﷺ gave. Huh? Exactly, yes. Sincerity is something that's in your heart. So there's an important note to mention about sincerity. There are some people who they mention their sincerity or their intention, they think they have to mention it on the tongue. This is not the case. You do not have to say, I'm getting up to pray 4 raka'ah for Allah, right? At Dhuhr, this is Dhuhr prayer, 4 raka'ah on, Thursday, whatever, right? You don't?
They make long dua. Before they make the salat, they'll put their hands up and they'll make like 20 seconds of what they're going to make themselves do.
Because they're not making dua. Those are people who believe that they are supposed to, in detail, mention to Allah what they're about to do. That's their intention. They're not making dua to Allah. They're telling Allah, oh Allah, I'm standing up before you to pray Dhuhr prayer, 4 raka'ah. For your sake and for your pleasure. Allahu Akbar. That's what it is. And this is not something that's legislated in Islam. You don't have to even do it. When you left to come to the masjid, what'd you come here for, Wahyu, today? What'd you come here for? For ilm, for the class, right? Tariq, when you got up and left. For the class. Bilal, what'd you come here for? Did any of you have to stop and think to yourself, okay, I'm going to the class at Masjid Tawfiq on 2900 Lindale Avenue North, right? Did you have to say that out loud or write it? No. It's just, Yani, that's what your intention is. It's that simple. It's not complicated, right? But it is a very important thing that you have to, as Muslims, we have to be self-aware when we are doing things. Because we do have a tendency to get into like cruise control, where you just do things, you don't even think about it. You know how you drive home and you don't even think about the fact like how you got to get there because you done it so many times and you just know, you don't think to yourself, I have to take a left here, that is street such and such, and then I'm going to go 2 blocks and then you don't. You just drive. You could even be talking on the phone, having a completely irrelevant conversation, and you just drive and you don't even think about it. Sometimes we get like that with our ibadah, with our acts of worship. And our heart should be aware when we're doing that. But al-muhim, we said that hadith is what? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ that all acts of worship, all acts have intentions behind them. And everybody will get what they intended. So if you intended to migrate for Allah and His Messenger, as the Prophet ﷺ gave the example, then that's how you're going to be rewarded. But if you intended something else, for business, for something else, pleasure, it wasn't for the sake of Allah, that's how you're going to be rewarded. Does that make sense? Tayyib. So that's sincerity. Then the second condition, which is also extremely important, is following the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, or the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Every act of worship that we do, brothers and sisters, every act of worship is haram unless Allah and His Messenger legislated it. Every act of worship is haram unless Allah and His Messenger legislated. How do we know this? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned in a hadith that is narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha, wherein she said that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ahdatha fi man amila amalan laysa alayhi amruna fahuwa rad." That whoever does an action that doesn't have my command on it, meaning the command of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, fahuwa rad, it's going to be rejected. It's not accepted by Allah. No matter how good your intentions were, no matter how pure your heart was, if it wasn't according to the way of the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't tell you to do it, and it's an act of worship, then khalas, it's worthless. And then in another wording of that same hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ahdatha fi amrina hadha ma laysa minhu fahuwa rad." That whoever innovates, does a new action, something new, and it doesn't have the command of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, فَهُوَ رَدْ, then it's also rejected. Does that make sense? So now we have how many conditions for ibadah? 2 conditions. If one of or the other is missing, then it's not an act of worship, and not only that, it will be rejected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first one is sincerity. The second one is that it's according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. That is what constitutes an act of worship. Does that make sense, y'all? Is that clear? Okay, alhamdulillah. So, inshallah, what we'll be talking about next week is going to be about shirk and about the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, namely principles and kind of like guidelines about dealing with the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're going to be talking about shirk and the names or attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So please, I'll remind all of you to take the time to read your book. Take the time to read your book. It's not too much. Just take a little bit out of your time. I'm sure all of us have smartphones. I'm sure all of us check our Facebook accounts. I'm sure all of us have time to look at the news. I'm sure all of us had time to do a number of different things. Take about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It will help only for you to benefit more from this class. It'll only help for you to be able to retain more from this class, so that everything that I say here isn't the first time that you ever heard it before, because you read about it before you came to the class. And then if you have a chance, which is even better, and like our teachers and scholars used to teach us, after the class that you read. So when you go home, if you took any notes, that you go over it. So the fact that I gave you the definition of ibadah now, you should go home and you should read that and look at it and think about the conversation that went around it. So that, and in that way, it will help stick. It will help stick in your head. And it's important to remember it because it's a principle. This is something that I really, really want to make sure that brothers and sisters understand. One of the most important things that will help you to practice your religion is learning what are called like qawa'id and usul. Qawa'id and usul. Principles and guidelines. This is extremely important because, as I told you last week, if you go and ask a sheikh one question, if you say, "Sheikh, is this halal or haram?" That's it. He answers you. You only know about that one thing. But if you have a principle, if you have like a guideline, you can use that to check other things that are similar. So for example, now that we said about the principle of the pillars of worship, if somebody comes and tells you, "Brother, let's go in the basement and make dhikr in the basement in the dark," you laughing, right? I had a brother who told me, wallahi, some brothers came and asked him, invited him to the house. Brother went to their house, and when he went there, they had a nice, beautiful lunch. And after that, they took him in the basement, right? And was making dhikr in the dark, in the basement. Wallahi. Sounds creepy. It does, doesn't it? But it happened. So, but he was a new Muslim. He didn't know no better. He was like, I didn't know what to do. It felt kind of uncomfortable or whatever, but he was like, I was a guest in their house. They were Muslim longer than I was, so I just did it. But if I just told you the principle, that you need two things in order for something to be an act of worship, directed towards Allah, that you want to get closer to Him. And the principles were what? Sincerity or intention, same thing. And what? And the way of the Prophet ﷺ. All that brother had to do is be like, "Brothers, mashallah, I'm so happy that you invited me to your house. I really appreciate that. And I'm not really sure about this whole basement thing. But could you just show me, or could you tell me where Allah said this in His book or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ?" That's all he had to do. And if they could say, "Sure, brother, it's right here in the Musnad of Imam Ahmed. Prophet ﷺ did such and such and such and such," which is impossible because they didn't have basements back then. But if he said blah, 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 it says it right here in the Hadith or whatever, then khalas, then he's good. And if they can't, which obviously they cannot, Prophet ﷺ didn't used to do that. So since they can't produce it, then that brother knows, based on his principle, should he go to the basement? No, he should not. He should not go to the basement. But based on the principle, even though he's never seen that before, something that you may never have encountered before, but now you have a principle to measure things by. When somebody comes to you and they be like, "Hey, akhi, we want to do such and such." I'm going to give y'all another real practical example. A real practical example. It says, "Brother, we finna go rob this bank." In New York, there was a group of brothers, and in New Jersey, there was a group of brothers who, and I met a brother when I was in Abha, older sheikh, about 60-something years old. His brother was telling me there was a sheikh who was teaching people, he was teaching brothers, you can go and rob the bank. With good intentions, because you bring the money to the masjid. You just bring a share of the cut to the masjid. So they got sincerity. They got the sincerity. These were good brothers. They want to do it for the sake of Allah. Right? We all laughing, but there's people who really do this kind of stuff. So then what? But they might have sincerity. But look it. Do y'all think Umar ibn Khattab, he went around robbing kuffar? That's something Umar ibn Khattab did? No, that's not something he did. That's not something. Do you think that's something the Prophet ﷺ taught the companions? The one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And Allah said about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we sent you, O messenger, we didn't send you except as a mercy for all of mankind. And somebody going robbing banks, does that sound like a mercy to mankind? Of course not. So now, So somebody who's never heard this before, he has a principle. Hold on, is that according to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? If it's not, does he participate? No, he doesn't. Sister says, oh, you know what, it's 2016. I don't really feel like wearing hijab. I think hijab is really in my heart. And it's about my modesty and how I carry myself. It has nothing to do with my hijab. She might be sincere, the most sincere sister in the world. But, is that according to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? Do you have any of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, any of the sahabiyat, the female companions of the Prophet ﷺ, who ever said that or did that? No, you didn't? Khalas. You have a principle now to measure it by. Is the sunnah, the sincerity that it's for the sake of Allah, and that it has to be according to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. That's your yardstick that you have now to measure up things. That's a guideline. That's a principle. That helps you in so many different arenas. Because you know why? Because you don't always have a sheikh to ask. Not everybody has a sheikh on speed dial. Not everybody goes to a masjid with an imam who speaks English and Arabic and has learned and knows this language and understands the culture and blah, blah, blah. It's not always available. Nobody, you don't know necessarily which are all the right websites to go to, right? But when you have principles, you're that much more empowered. You're that much more enabled and able to practice your Islam practically. And that way you can be careful. That way you can protect your deen and your religion. You can protect your family. You can protect your children. And you know how to conduct yourself. Because there's all kinds of things going on. And you be seeing on the news all kinds of stuff happen. You be like, man, what should Muslims do? And if you ain't got no principles, and you ain't got no guidelines, you ain't got no rules, you're going to be stuck. You're going to be lost. All you know how to do is just pray and read Quran every now and then and make some dhikr. That's all you know. Does that make sense? I hope my little rant didn't, throw y'all off, inshallah. But, I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He bless us with knowledge that is beneficial, and that He increase us with knowledge that is beneficial, and that He protect us from knowledge that does not benefit, and that He protect us from hearts that do not have humility before Him, and that He protect us from souls and egos that are never satisfied, and we seek refuge with Him from prayers and du'as that are not raised and answered. Ameen. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. And so, inshallah, it's 7:44. Inshallah, I know, alhamdulillah, if any of y'all have some questions, inshallah, for the first few minutes, we try to leave it mainly for the questions that are related to what we talked about. So if it's about ibadah, if it's about the principles that we talked about, or tawheed, ahlan wa sahlan. And then if there are no questions revolving around that, then we can ask, inshallah, whatever else, inshallah.